There's something in bodybuilding that goes beyond just muscle. Some athletes are good. Some become champions. And a very small number seem almost built to dominate the sport. Heath belongs to that last category. Whenever he stepped on stage, the audience had the feeling they were witnessing something different, almost unreal. A physique so complete, so detailed, and so incredibly full that it seemed to challenge the limits of the human body itself. But how does someone actually build a physique like that? How does an athlete not only win, but dominate the most important stage in the world for so many consecutive years? Heath wasn't just another champion of the Mr. Olympia. He became the symbol of a new era in bodybuilding, an era defined by incredibly full muscles, insane levels of detail, and conditioning that only a handful of athletes have ever managed to achieve. For 7 straight years, he accomplished something many believed was nearly impossible. He stayed firmly at the absolute top of the sport. But Phil's story isn't only about victories. It's also about challenges, pressure, and the weight that comes with carrying the title of the best bodybuilder in the world. Because when you're at the top, everyone wants to take you down. And that's exactly what started to happen in the final years of his reign. So make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's grow this community together. Now, let's get into the story. Long before becoming one of the biggest names in global bodybuilding, Heath was just a young kid growing up in Seattle. He was born on December 18, 1979, in a city known for its cold, rainy weather, very far from the bright lights of the bodybuilding stages where he would later become a legend. His childhood wasn't defined by luxury or ease. Quite the opposite. From an early age, he had to learn how to rely on himself and develop discipline. His parents worked long hours, which meant Phil grew up learning independence early on. That environment helped shape his personality. He developed traits that would later become crucial in his career: focus, responsibility, and a powerful work ethic. Even though he had no idea yet what path his life would take, those early experiences were already building the mindset of a future champion. At that time, however, bodybuilding wasn't even on his radar. His true passion was basketball. From a young age, he showed clear talent on the court, combining speed, game intelligence, and an impressive dedication to training. Basketball quickly became a central part of his life during his teenage years, and he began to see it as a real opportunity to build a career. His hard work eventually paid off when he earned an athletic scholarship to play at the University of Denver. Playing as a point guard, Phil demonstrated that he had the skill and discipline needed to compete at a high level in college basketball. At that point, everything suggested his future would be tied to the basketball court, not the bodybuilding stage. But sometimes life changes direction in the most unexpected ways. In Phil's case, it started with a simple decision. He began training in the gym to improve his performance in basketball. What no one could have imagined at the time was that this small step would open the door to something much bigger. The question nobody was asking back then was this: could that young basketball player be on the verge of discovering a talent that would completely change his life? At first, weight training wasn't Phil's main focus. For him, the gym was just a tool to improve his basketball performance. As a point guard, he needed to be stronger, more explosive, and more durable on the court. So, like many college athletes, he began lifting weights simply to gain a physical advantage over his opponents. But something unusual started happening. While many athletes need months or even years to see significant changes in their bodies, Phil seemed to progress at a completely different pace. His muscles grew rapidly, his definition appeared with surprising ease, and his overall structure began to stand out inside the gym. It was almost as if his body had been designed for that kind of training. Coaches and teammates noticed it almost immediately. Some said he had rare genetics, something you simply don't see every day. Others began encouraging him to consider bodybuilding more seriously. At first, he didn't take the idea too seriously. After all, basketball and his college career were still his main priorities. But the more he trained, the clearer it became that something special was happening. The results were coming too fast to ignore. What started as a simple supplement to basketball began to spark a new curiosity. Slowly but surely, the gym stopped being just support for his sport, and started becoming the center of his daily routine. That's when Phil made a decision that would completely change the direction of his life. He chose to leave basketball behind and bet everything on something new, something uncertain, but something that felt like his true gift. After deciding to walk away from basketball and fully commit to bodybuilding, Phil knew he had to prove that his talent was truly special. Training hard in the gym was only the first step. The real test would come when he stepped onto a bodybuilding stage for the first time, standing in front of judges, experienced competitors, and a crowd already used to seeing incredible physiques. That moment finally arrived in 2003, when Phil stepped on stage at the NPC Rocky Mountain Championships, a respected amateur contest in the American bodybuilding scene. For most athletes, a first competition is usually filled with nerves and learning experiences. But in Phil's case, what happened was something completely different. From the moment he appeared under the stage lights, it was clear there was something unusual about his physique. His combination of full muscle bellies, natural symmetry, and sharp definition immediately caught the attention of both judges and spectators. The result was a dominant victory in his very first competition. It was also at this event that he received the nickname that would follow him throughout his entire career, The Gift. The name perfectly reflected what everyone in the audience was thinking at that moment. It looked like Heath had been blessed with extraordinary genetic potential for bodybuilding. Winning his debut didn't slow him down. If anything, it fueled his drive to keep improving. Phil continued competing in the amateur circuit, refining his physique and gaining more stage experience with each appearance. One of the standout moments during that period was his victory at the Mr. Colorado, where he once again proved he wasn't just a promising newcomer, but an athlete with real potential to go very far in the sport. All of that progress eventually led to one of the biggest goals for any aspiring bodybuilder, earning an IFBB Pro card. In 2005, Phil Heath finally achieved that milestone, officially becoming a professional athlete in the International Federation of Bodybuilding and Fitness. Earning a pro card is already a huge accomplishment, but for Phil, it was only the beginning. Now he was officially competing among IFBB professionals, facing some of the best bodybuilders in the world. Many athletes take years to adapt to that level, dealing with losses and slowly building experience along the way. But Phil was about to show that his path would not follow the traditional route. Right in his professional debut at the Colorado Pro Championships, Phil accomplished something very few athletes manage to do: he won the show. For a competitor who had just entered the professional circuit, that result shocked many people within the sport. It's not common to see a rookie defeat experienced pros in his very first major test. The reason for that victory became obvious every time he stepped on stage. His physique seemed to combine three qualities that rarely appear together in a single athlete: impressive size, balanced symmetry, and incredibly detailed conditioning. His muscles had a round, full look that immediately stood out under the harsh lights of competition. With such strong results so early in his career, Phil's name started circulating more and more among fans, coaches, and professional athletes. Many began to see him as a future threat to the very top of bodybuilding. But there was still one final stage that would prove whether he truly belonged among the elite, the biggest stage in the sport. That opportunity arrived in 2008, when he made his debut at the Mr. Olympia, the most prestigious contest in the world of bodybuilding. Even as a newcomer standing among giants of the sport, Phil shocked everyone by finishing in third place. It was an extremely rare result for someone competing at Olympia for the very first time. After impressing the bodybuilding world with a third-place finish at the 2008 Mr. Olympia, Phil quickly became viewed as one of the biggest rising stars in the sport. Many experts believed it was only a matter of time before he would reach the very top. Still, the road to bodybuilding's most coveted title would present a few obstacles. In 2009, he entered the Mr. Olympia surrounded by enormous expectations. Many fans already saw him as a potential title contender. But shortly before the competition, something unexpected happened. Phil suffered a severe stomach infection, which completely disrupted his preparation for the event. In a sport where every physical detail matters, that setback had a direct impact on how he looked on stage. Even competing far from his best condition, he still managed to place fifth. For many athletes, that would already be an outstanding result. But for someone who was being projected as a future champion, it was seen as a small step backward. However, the following year marked the moment when the story truly began to change. At the 2010 Mr. Olympia, Phil Heath returned more prepared, more experienced, and with an even more refined physique. His improvement was obvious on stage: fuller muscles, better overall balance, and an impressive level of conditioning. The result reflected that progress. He finished the competition as runner-up, placing just behind the legendary Jay Cutler, who was still dominating the top of the sport. That result sent a clear message to the entire bodybuilding world. Phil Heath was no longer just a promising young talent, he was now only one step away from the throne. And many people had already started to realize that the reign of Jay Cutler was under serious threat. After years of progress, sacrifice, and learning on stage, Phil had finally reached the moment that would define his career. The year was 2011, and the bodybuilding world was about to witness a historic shift. On the stage of the Mr. Olympia, he faced none other than the dominant champion of the era, Jay Cutler, one of the most respected names in the sport. It was the classic showdown, the established king versus the rapidly rising challenger. When Heath stepped on stage that year, it was obvious that something special was happening. His physique displayed an extraordinary combination of muscle mass, symmetry, and razor-sharp conditioning. His muscles seemed to burst through the skin, showing a level of detail that very few athletes had ever presented. When the final results were announced, the outcome confirmed what many had already suspected: Phil Heath was the new Mr. Olympia. But winning the title once is already an incredible achievement. The real challenge is holding on to it. And that's exactly where Heath began building something even greater. From that moment on, he started a reign that would become one of the most dominant runs in bodybuilding history. Between 2011 and 2017, Phil Heath captured 7 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles, completely dominating the open division for nearly a decade. His physique quickly became a reference point in modern bodybuilding. Phil was known for displaying extremely round muscle bellies, near-perfect symmetry, and deep muscular detail, traits that made his physique stand out instantly on stage. Under the harsh lights of competition, his body looked almost sculpted, with muscle separations and striations that impressed both fans and judges alike. During that same period, he also proved his dominance in other major contests. He won prestigious events like the Shero Classic and the Arnold Classic Europe, further solidifying his status as the best bodybuilder of his generation. His dominance was so consistent that many began to see Heath not just as a champion, but as one of the greatest competitors in the entire history of the Mr. Olympia stage. After dominating Olympia for 7 straight years, Phil Heath arrived at the 2018 Mr. Olympia surrounded by enormous expectations. If he managed to win again, he would claim his 8th title, tying legendary names like Ronnie Coleman and Lee Haney, the only athletes in history to reach that number. For many fans, it seemed like Heath was about to secure his place in the most exclusive club in bodybuilding history. But the atmosphere that year was different. For the first time in a long time, Heath's dominance seemed genuinely threatened. A dangerous competitor stepped onto the stage, Shawn Rhoden. Known for his refined aesthetics, tighter waistline, and excellent posing presentation, Rhoden brought a physique package that immediately caught the judges' attention. Phil still presented his trademark look: huge, dense, and incredibly detailed muscles. But some signs of wear and tear started to become a topic of discussion among fans and analysts. Small details that once went unnoticed were now being examined much more closely. When the moment of the final announcement arrived, the result shocked many people. Shawn Rhoden was declared the new Mr. Olympia, while Phil Heath finished the competition in 2nd place. With that, one of the most impressive winning streaks in the history of the sport came to an end. That defeat marked the end of an era. For years, Heath had seemed almost unbeatable. But bodybuilding is a relentless sport, new challenges are always emerging. After the loss in 2018, Phil's future in bodybuilding became a major question mark. For years he had been the man to beat, the dominant Mr. Olympia champion. But now, for the first time in a long time, real doubts started to appear about whether he could return to the top. Beyond the competitive pressure, Heath was also facing another silent opponent: his own body. After years of extreme contest prep, brutal training sessions, and strict dieting, Heath began dealing with physical issues that required surgeries and a significant recovery period. For a high-level athlete, that kind of break can be decisive. The sport never stops, new talent emerges, and the competitive level keeps rising every season. Even so, he decided to try one more time. After 2 years away from the Olympia stage, he returned in 2020, determined to prove that he could still compete among the best in the world. But the landscape had changed dramatically. A new generation of athletes had begun to dominate the top of the open division. At that edition of the Mr. Olympia, the title went to Big Ramy, who presented an incredibly massive and well-conditioned physique. Second place went to Brandon Curry, the defending champion from the previous year. Heath finished the contest in third place, a highly respectable result considering the time he had spent away from the stage and the physical challenges he had faced. Even though he was still one of the most impressive physiques on stage, that result confirmed something many people had already begun to notice: the era of Heath's absolute dominance had come to an end. When discussing the greatest names in bodybuilding history, Heath's name inevitably appears near the very top of the list. With 7 Mr. Olympia titles, earned between 2011 and 2017, he joined an extremely exclusive group of athletes who dominated the sport for years. Staying at the top for that long isn't just about talent, it demands consistency, discipline, and the ability to continuously evolve. Heath's physique represented a real shift in the standards of modern bodybuilding. His round muscle bellies, incredible muscle density, and the extreme level of detail he displayed on stage made many fans and experts begin to see the sport in a different way. He brought a level of fullness and muscle separation that became a benchmark for an entire generation of competitors. More than just victories, Heath left a clear mark on how athletes prepare for competitions. Many competitors began pursuing a more balanced physique, with extreme attention to muscular detail and stage presentation. In other words, Heath helped raise the standard for what it means to bring an elite physique to the professional bodybuilding stage. Even after his years of dominance at Olympia, Heath remains active in the bodybuilding world. He attends events, shares knowledge, and continues to serve as a reference point for athletes who dream of reaching the top of the sport. His experience and journey continue to inspire both beginners and seasoned competitors alike. In the end, Heath's legacy goes far beyond trophies. He proved that talent must walk side by side with relentless hard work and a champion's mindset. And now the question goes to you watching this: does Heath deserve to be considered one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time? Or is there someone else you would place above him in the history of the sport?